They met on a Thursday afternoon when the air smelled faintly of rain and old paper. Mira had been rushing late, distracted, thinking about everything except where she was going when her notebook slipped from her arms and spilled across the library floor. Loose pages slid under tables and chairs, scattering thoughts she hadn't meant for anyone to see. Before embarrassment could bloom fully, someone knelt beside her. "I think this one escaped," he said, holding up a page with a careful smile. She laughed, a little breathless. "It does that sometimes." That was how she met Theo. They didn't exchange numbers that day. Life simply began placing them in each other's path on buses, at bakeries, in the park where sunlight filtered gently through the trees. They spoke at first about ordinary things, then about hopes that felt fragile and fears that lived quietly beneath confidence. Theo listened like it mattered. Mira noticed everything. It grew in shared afternoons and unspoken understanding, in the way Theo offered his jacket without comment, in the way Mira always saved him the corner of the bench that caught the best light. Their first kiss happened beneath a lavender sky, soft and sure, followed by laughter and the steady calm of knowing something real had begun. And then, life continued. They graduated. They made choices that felt exciting and frightening in equal measure. Theo studied engineering, drawn to the quiet satisfaction of repairing what others discarded. Mira pursued literature and design, filling notebooks with words and pressed flowers even as the world asked her to be practical. They learned how love changes when routines change. There were mornings when they rushed past each other, schedules clashing, goodbyes spoken too quickly. There were evenings when exhaustion made them quieter than usual. But they learned how to return to each other, to ask questions, to listen, to forgive before resentment had time to grow. They argued sometimes, softly at first. Then more honestly. They learned that love wasn't the absence of conflict, but the willingness to face it together. Theo learned to say what he felt instead of fixing it in silence. Mira learned that not every fear needed to be carried alone. When they moved into their first small apartment, nothing matched. The couch was too big. The kettle whistled too loudly. The clock Theo fixed ticked unevenly at first, but it was theirs. They filled the walls with memories, photos from weekend trips, ticket stubs, mirror sketches, Theo's careful repairs. They learned the rhythms of shared life, grocery lists on the fridge, late-night conversations on the floor, quiet mornings where words weren't necessary. There were moments when the world felt heavy. Theo worked long hours, coming home tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. On those nights, Mira would rest her head on his shoulder, and Theo would lace his fingers through hers, grounding them both. They learned that love isn't always grand, it's showing up when it's hard. Years passed gently. They attended weddings and funerals, celebrated promotions and weathered disappointments. They grew into themselves and somehow into each other. The way they loved matured, less nervous, more intentional, deeper in ways they couldn't have imagined when they were young. One evening, years after that first library meeting, they returned to the park where they had spent so many afternoons. The trees were taller now, so were they, in ways that mattered. Theo stopped walking. "Mira," he said, his voice steady but soft, "do you remember asking if moments could be important?" She smiled. "I do. This one is," he said, and held out a small ring, not flashy, not perfect, but chosen with care. She said yes before he finished speaking. They married without spectacle, surrounded by people who loved them. Mira stitched pressed flowers into her dress. Theo wore a watch he had repaired himself. When they promised forever, it felt less like a leap and more like a continuation. Their love softened with time. Then, one ordinary morning, everything changed. Mira stood in the doorway, holding a small white stick. Eyes wide and shining, Theo crossed the room in 3 steps, reading her face before she said a word. "Really?" he whispered. She nodded, laughing and crying at the same time. Their first child arrived on a rainy night. Theo cried without embarrassment. Mira laughed through exhaustion. The baby fit perfectly against her chest. as if the world had always been waiting for them to become this version of themselves. Their home grew louder but warmer. There were toys on the floor and fingerprints on the windows. Theo fixed broken toy cars instead of clocks now. Mira read stories aloud, pressing kisses into soft hair afterward. They had another child later, a bright, curious presence who asked endless questions and laughed easily. The house filled with drawings taped to the fridge, mismatched socks, and the steady hum of family life. Some evenings were chaotic, others were slow. But happiness lived in the ordinary. On weekends, they returned to the park. Their children ran ahead while Theo and Mira walked hand in hand, watching sunlight filter through the trees just as it once had. Sometimes Mira caught Theo looking at her the same way he had years ago. "What?" she'd ask, smiling. He'd shake his head. "Nothing, just amazed." At night, after the children slept, they sat together in the quiet, tired but content. Years passed gently. Their children grew, so did their love, not louder, but deeper. Sometimes Mira thought back to a library floor scattered with pages and how a single moment of kindness had turned into a life full of love. Thank you for listening to this story.